Hello, my name is Dr. Mark Shelley. I'm a family practitioner in Port Allegheny, Pennsylvania. It's a rural part of Pennsylvania where I've practiced family medicine for the last 28 years. I think most of us understand that medicine and indeed the country is in a position of we're in trouble. And in researching this and trying to understand what was happening and why, with the help of my friends from the LaRouche organization, I've been able to make some connections which I believe would help to explain why we are where we are and where we might expect to be if some things aren't changed. So we've put together a statement which is titled "Doctors Against Murderous Obamacare," and I'll read that now. As a physician and an American, I feel compelled at this time of peril to address the changes that I see in the process of the actual delivery of health care to the American people. From my perspective as a family practitioner, and from my concern as a citizen, and for my fellow man, I must speak out to explain the dangers that I see in the implementation of American health care today, as exemplified by what is known as Obamacare. What I see being done today is chillingly consistent with the findings and warnings of Dr. Leo Alexander, the chief consultant to the U.S. prosecutors at the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal after World War II. In his article entitled "Medical Science Under Dictatorship," that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine on July 14, 1949, Dr. Alexander made clear what happens to medicine when it, quote, becomes subordinated to the guiding philosophy of a dictatorship, unquote. That dictatorship today is money. Medicine and economics are joined at the hips, but in real economics, economic considerations and monetary considerations are not identical. The problem today is that monetary considerations take priority over all else, unfortunately including human life. The fact that healthcare is considered synonymous with the acquisition of health insurance today is indicative of this monetary/healthcare problem. Nor is this a government versus private sector problem, nor is it a Republican versus Democratic Party question. We have just suffered a 16-day government shutdown that almost precipitated a financial Armageddon, courtesy of President Obama and the Democratic and Republican Party leadership. I'd like to insert now part of what I see as a way to help with this problem. When I diagnose a patient, I will take the facts from the history, the facts from the physical exam. If a patient looks like they have cancer, I tell the patient, you might have cancer, but we're going to find out for sure exactly what the problem is, and then we will find out what the best treatment will be. And it doesn't matter if you smoked, it doesn't matter if you did drugs, it didn't matter if you were born under the wrong sign. We're going to find out what the problem is, what exactly the problem is, and how best to fix it. And drop the blame. I mean, when I speak against Obamacare, I'm not speaking against Obama. We don't need more polarization. But we're over-polarized now. So please understand, there's nothing personal about this. This is about principle. And this is about knowing what's wrong and knowing how to fix it. So that was an aside. But I'll continue with this. At the same time that the government was in this shutdown, the USA Today, October 22nd, reported that the top 10 CEOs of the United States made $5.7 billion in 1 year. Okay. That's between 10 people. even as we are at the verge of a financial blowout that will dwarf the one of 2008 and 2009. This is financial madness. The question is, are we to dismantle our healthcare system based upon the recommendations of these mismanagers and the people whose programs for theft would make Jesse James blush? Now, to remedy this crisis, we must undertake 3 important initiatives. Number 1, separate the purpose and principle of medicine from a diseased economic system. Restore the essence of the Hippocratic Oath as the philosophical center of the medical profession. The practice of medicine is meant to serve the development of people, not Wall Street and the financial conglomerates, with a population reduction agenda. Hippocrates said, "It's the duty of the physician not only to do that which immediately belongs to him, but likewise to secure the cooperation of the sick, of those who are in attendance, and of all the external agents." Number 2, the economic problem. We need to restore the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933. If you don't know the Glass-Steagall Act, you need to learn it. Okay, it's the same Wall Street debt bubble, which is crushing the federal government, is crushing the medical profession, as well as the rest of the economy. The only way to liberate ourselves from its destructive effects is to restore the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933. Its repeal in 1999 opened the door to the growth of the biggest financial bubble in history. We must separate commercial banking from investment banking and let Wall Street sink under the weight of its own bad investments. No more bailouts or bail-ins for Wall Street. Number 3, retire/impeach President Obama. He's repeatedly demonstrated that he is incapable of performing the job for which we hired him. This is not complicated. This is what always happens. When someone fails, we find someone who can do the job better. Multiple legal authorities have already assembled articles for impeachment. This man has failed you and will allow you to die with his inept and undeniably lethal policies that masquerade as health care reform. That sounds strong. It is strong. I wouldn't say that if not for the hard, cold facts that I'm faced with on an everyday basis. It's time for the American people to wake up before it's too late. I don't normally speak in such forceful terms, but some people will awake with an alarm clock and some people need a bucket of cold water. I really feel strongly that we need to take action. With where we are today in history, this long slide, which was predicted in 1949 by Dr. Leo Alexander, this long slide is being, the ribbon's being put on it with Obamacare. It didn't come overnight, but it is absolutely being finalized with Obamacare. So, that, I believe, gives an idea of what, of these connections, of why did we have a financial shutdown and the failure of this implementation of Obamacare at the same time? Because it's one and the same problem. Medicine today is being slashed. The actual practice of medicine is being slashed because there's not enough money. Where did the money go? How many kids are going to be treated for the $5.7 billion that the 10 CEOs got? The Standard & Poor's indices for health insurance companies since 2010, with the initiation of the Affordable Care Act, those indices have gone up 200 to 300%. While I have a patient who went to the emergency room last week because she was having excruciating abdominal pain, and the patient's daughter was told that she's dying, she has renal failure, and that her doctor, myself, should have told her that. She shouldn't be bothering them. She shouldn't be in the emergency room, and she was sent home only to go to another emergency room where she was diagnosed with an overwhelming infection, which killed her. Okay, I mean, these are the issues which I deal with on an everyday basis. The doctor scolded this woman's daughter for bringing her to the emergency room with her fatal illness. Okay. Meantime, there go 200 to 300% increase in the indices for these health insurance companies. But in the interest of time, I mean, I could give anecdotes for a long time, but that was one of the more recent ones. That was a week ago.
Well, Dr. Shelley, thank you very much for that opening statement. We have some questions, and I think get an opportunity to say more about these things you initiated there. Let me begin by asking you, your references to Dr. Leo Alexander prompted me to go back and read his 1949 article on medical science under dictatorship in its entirety. And I want to read you several short quotes from the article, which I believe have great relevance for today, and ask you to comment. After reviewing some of the subtle shifts in medical thinking that paved the way for the monstrous mass murders that were perpetrated by the Nazis, Dr. Alexander writes, quote, "The question that this fact prompts is whether there are any danger signs that American physicians have also been affected with the same Hegelian, cold-blooded utilitarian philosophy, and whether early traces of it can be detected in their medical thinking that may make them vulnerable to departures of the type that occurred in Germany. Physicians have become dangerously close to being mere technicians of rehabilitation. This essentially Hegelian rational attitude has led them to make certain distinctions in the handling of acute and chronic diseases. Hospitals like to limit themselves to the care of patients who can be fully rehabilitated, and the patient whose full rehabilitation is unlikely finds himself, at least in the best and most advanced centers of healing, as a second-class patient. I wish to emphasize that this point of view did not arise primarily within the medical profession, which has always been outstanding in a highly competitive and economic society for giving freely and unstintingly of its time and efforts, but was imposed by the shortage of funds available, both private and public. From the attitude of the easing of patients with chronic diseases away from the doors of the best types of treatment facilities available to the actual dispatching of such patients to killing centers is a long but nevertheless logical step." Unquote. So my questions are twofold. Number one, do you see the American medicine today being at precisely the danger threshold that Dr. Alexander warned would lead to crimes of mass murder, such as were committed by the Nazis? And number two, what do your fellow doctors say about this horrible situation among themselves? And why don't they, more of them, speak out against it?
Okay, the first question, is this really what Dr. Leo Alexander was speaking about? Short answer is yes. To say it's a threshold, that something changed suddenly, that there's a point of no return, that's difficult. You can't see where the line is drawn. I hate to use that, but if it's a threshold, it's that a long, insidious boiling of the frog, unnoticed worsening in how medicine is practiced is being finalized. It's being made policy by Obamacare. Right. If Obamacare is ever able to function, which is ever able to go into place, which is at this point just still quite debatable. They haven't even been able to sign anybody up for it, or it's terribly flawed. If it goes into effect, it's not going to work. The math doesn't work. Okay. So why fight it? It's not going to work anyway. Well, because even if it doesn't work, it's going to destroy what is already working. And that's not a position that any of us want to be in. Mm-hmm. You know, the implementation of Obamacare, which will not work, will stop the system that is in place now, from my perspective. So yeah, Obamacare is a threshold. It's a validation of these policies, of this approach, of this dehumanization of healthcare. Mm-hmm. It's Hegelian.
And what do you think about the question of your fellow doctors and why they remain quiet about this?
Well, they're not quiet to each other. You know, I mean, most physicians really do not want to continue doing what they're get along and talk to each other. So it's important. Point being, it's important to be part of this society. It's important for physicians to be able to talk, and they don't want to be shunned, and they'll be ostracized. Mm-hmm. I would be ostracized for saying this if I wasn't already. So.
All right, that's great. Rebecca, you have a question?
Sure. You talk about how physicians in the medical field don't want to speak out against Obamacare. What made you decide for you to do it, and what are your hopes for making this statement?
Well, I guess I've always spoken out about, I've always felt very strongly about the fact that I have to watch my patients die. And I can't be everywhere to catch every one of them while things happen, like the patient with the renal disease who actually died from treatable infection. Mm-hmm. I had another patient who had gone to the hospital 2 years ago, and she was old, okay, you know, sin number one. Mm-hmm. And she came back from the hospital after where she was briefly treated for pneumonia. The family was told that she had aortic stenosis, and she was old, and she was not given any intravenous fluid, was not allowed anything by mouth, had no medicines given except for morphine. Mm-hmm. And the family was told she was going to die because essentially she was too old. Well, I was able to get there, and I said to the daughter, I said, she doesn't have to die. Yeah. And she said, that's not what they told me. Because you believe what you're told first, so you have to be untaught and then taught. But I said, she doesn't have to die. Now, we all have to die sometime. And so we treated her for pneumonia. And a week later, she was playing bingo, and she went on to live another 1.5 years. Okay? I want to do that. I can't do that anymore. I can't be in all these places to catch all these people that this system is allowing to die. Mm-hmm. And you reach a point where it's enough. And maybe that was it. What do I hope to do? I hope to get other people to speak out. I hope other physicians will see what I say, and they'll say, that's my life, and we don't have to do this. That's probably why I did it.
Thank you.
Let me ask another question, Dr. Shelley. Dr. Leo Alexander wrote in his 1949 article on medicine under circumstances of dictatorship, quote, under all forms of dictatorship, the dictating bodies or individuals claim that all is being done for the best of the people as a whole, and that for that reason they look at health merely in terms of utility, efficiency, productivity. It is natural in such a setting that eventually Hegel's principle that what is useful is good wins out completely. The killing center is the reductio ad absurdum of all health planning based only on rational principles and economy and not on compassion and divine law. Be sure, American physicians are still far from the point of thinking of killing centers, but they have arrived at a danger point in thinking at which the likelihood of full rehabilitation is considered a factor that should determine the amount of time, effort, and cost to be devoted to a particular type of patient on the part of the social body upon which this decision rests, unquote. So my question is, does an adherence to the Obama government mandated guidelines that direct doctors and hospitals, etc., to withhold treatment under various circumstances actually turn those institutions into what are properly scientifically termed killing centers, as Dr. Alexander describes them?
Obviously, we don't have a building with a crematorium and full buses of people going in the front and empty buses going out the back. It's much more subtle, but they're not killing centers. It's a killing policy. It's a killing epicenter. It's a way of solving the problem. The problem of Wall Street is, where the hell are we going to get money now? And we're spending all this money on these people who are only going to live for a week or 10 days, according to the whatever data we can generate. So let's just let them die now before we spend all that money on this wasted last 7 or 10 days. Because I have this literature right here that tells me the average length of life after a person presents with X number of symptoms is 10 days. Is it really worth? It's really worth $10,000. Really worth $1,000, or maybe is it even worth $10 to get this person to live another week? Because after all, we have to have this money. So that's the policy. Is it a killing center? No, it's a killing. And again, I hesitate to use such strong language, but when else are people going to wake up? I mean, I'd love to know the answer to that. I really don't want to make anybody any trouble. I just want the problem to end. I think this is probably the only way it's going to end, is to say that it's a killing center because these people are being killed. My patient last week was killed. She had a treatable illness. She was on dialysis, and the emergency room doctor, as he's scolding the daughter for bringing her mother writhing in pain to the emergency room, said, she's on dialysis. She's going to die. I'm paraphrasing, I wasn't there. And my question is then, why do we have dialysis? Which probably is a question they'll eventually ask. It's a process. It's a slippery slope. It's a morphing. It's not a killing center, like they say, with a wall around it. It's not a concentration camp with wire. Maybe it's a concentration camp with an intangible of sorts.
Yeah.
So, is it a killing center? No, they're not killing centers. It's a killing policy. I know it sounds extreme. And I would love for somebody to show me that I'm wrong. Because I don't want this to be true. Mm-hmm. We were covered with policies that tell us that we need to learn who is not worth treating. We were talking the other day, and I picked up a journal which had the new American College of Physician guidelines for colonoscopy. And we're directed, and I will eventually be judged and penalized for not following the directives. We are directed to not do colonoscopies on people who are 75 years of age or older. Because it takes 10 years to develop a colon cancer, and we don't expect them to live for another 10 years. So
Right.
even if you have a colon cancer at the age of 76, it's not cost effective to diagnose and treat that. Okay. The other part of that American College of Physicians statement was that if the patient is not expected to live for 10 years, you shouldn't order a colonoscopy. Which, who determines how long they'll live? I mean,
Yeah.
That's,
How is that determined? How can you dictate that?
well, I'm sure there'll be an algorithm somewhere that will
Yeah,
dictate
right.
how long you're expected to live,
Right.
and that's what we follow. Suppose I'm now being held accountable for ordering inappropriate colonoscopies, and this will always be worded in such a way that that the physician is transgressor. The patient's 74 and a half years old, and I order a colonoscopy versus 75 and a half years old. Well, I can order the colonoscopy 6 months later, and the patient, and I'll be penalized one way or another. The patient went on to develop colon cancer, which metastasized, which slowly kills him over the next 5 years. And that's expected because he was going to die in 10 years anyway. I mean, it's not right. And it's not even like it's saving money. It's taking money that was promised. It's breaking a promise to these people by myself with the oath of Hippocrates, by the people who took their money for Medicare, by the profession. It's breaking their promise. It's taking the money and sending it to Wall Street to go and to put another drop in this ocean. I want people to be paid for hard work. They absolutely should. That's the point. They're not being paid for hard work. So that's why there's only one problem. It's just manifesting in many different ways. And I mean, when we talk about it in terms of a child dying, people listen. Maybe that's what it takes. You talk about losing your retirement 10 years from now, most people don't respond the same way.
Okay.
So I'm sorry.
All right. I have one more question, Dr. Shelley. Do you find it ironic that according to reports released by the New York Times and the Kaiser Commission on Medicaid and the uninsured in the last several weeks, that over 5 million and perhaps as many as 9 million Americans are known in advance to be disqualified for coverage under Obamacare? After all, the official name of Obamacare is the Affordable Care Act of 2010, and its stated purpose is to provide health care for all Americans. The disqualified status hits those poor persons who make too little annual income to qualify for a federal subsidy on an insurance policy from the exchange, specifically less than 138% of the official poverty line, and too much money to qualify to enroll in Medicaid relative to the poverty line rules in their state. Is not Obamacare one of the worst and potentially most deadly cases of no truth in advertising in American medical history?
Yes. I mean, is it ironic? Actually, it's absolutely predictable. I mean, you're not a liar once. This is not something that this is not a behavior that you engage in briefly. And the fact that this wasn't part of the beginning of the plan when the plan was created and pushed, that is deceit by omission. Okay? People know deceit. Little kids know deceit. We all know deceit. It doesn't matter if it's deceit by open intent or deceit by omission. It's still deceit, and you can't. Credibility is not a commodity. It's the credibility is gone. It's ironic. Well, it's no more ironic than anything else in this. The Affordable Care Act is not affordable. It's bankrupting us.
Mhm.
It's not even a care act. It's always when there is a program being created which is unpalatable, let's say, it always gets the opposite word. It's called the opposite.
Mhm.
I think about some of the our president he labeled himself as a great uniter, and his policies, the administration policies, have been constant, intensive polarization. Old against young, black against white, men against women, rich against poor, East Coast against West Coast. Who knows? Everybody is polarized. This is the most polarized this country's been, and it's not productive.
Mhm.
But speaking of the Affordable Care Act, it reminds me of Dr. Leo Alexander's article when he spoke of. He described the early euthanasia movement in Germany, and when there were forms made out, and people went through checklists for whether or not they should be allowed to live, and what was the name of the vans that carried these children to the death camp or to the killing center? They're called the Charitable Transport Organization or something to that. I can find that if we have a second. It was very interesting that all of this, the entire process, had each of these parts were opposite of what they really were. They make the strongest terms of kindness and caring.
It's sort of like Orwell, just the Orwellian newspeak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the Charitable Transport Company for the Sick.
Yeah.
That loaded children with polio to be taken away. And then they had the organization by which they decided whether people should be euthanized or not was the Realms Work Committee for the Cure and Care. Okay. And we have the Affordable Care and Patient Protection Act. They're just facts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Good.
Dr. Shelley, thank you very much.
You're welcome.